Welcome to Take the Lead Radio with Dr. Diane Hamilton, where she interviews some of the most successful leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, and other individuals who will inspire you to take the lead in your career and personal life. And now, here is Dr. Diane Hamilton.
I am here with Dr. John Demartini, who is a world-renowned specialist in human behavior. He's a researcher, author, and global educator. He is the founder of the Demartini Institute, a U.S.-based private research and educational organization with curriculum of more than 70 courses focused on human development. He's the author of more than 40 self-development books, which have been translated in more than 36 languages. I'm sure more than the last time I looked. There's so much that he's done. He's shared the stage with Deepak Chopra, Richard Branson. I'm trying to think of everything that I've seen that he's done. Amazing. You've seen him in The Secret. He's shared the screen with Hugh Jackman, Seal, Ringo Starr. I could be here all day introducing you. So I think we'll jump in. It's so nice to have you here, Dr. Demartini.
Thank you for having me. Great.
Well, I was really looking forward to this because you and I study human behavior in this, and of course I study about this much and you studied this much. So I'm very interested in learning about your research into the ologies and all of that. But I really want to get a backstory on you. I know everybody probably knows you and your work and everything, but you have a really fascinating backstory, and I hoped you might share that.
Oh gosh, I don't want to go too long on that, but I had learning problems as a child. I ended up having difficulty in school. I dropped out. I was a street kid as a teenager. I hitchhiked from Texas to California when I was 14. 15, I moved to Hawaii. I was a surfer. I nearly died at 17. In the recovery of that, I met a teacher named Paul Bragg. Paul Bragg, one night in 1 hour with one message. This one man really, really, really spoke to me and inspired me to want to do something different with my life and help me overcome my learning challenges because I had learning problems as a child. And that was the day I made a decision that I wanted to overcome my learning problems and someday become intelligent, learn how to read, and learn how to speak properly. And nearly 8 years later, here I am. I learned how to read, I learned how to speak a bit, and I certainly want to travel the world and do that. So I've been doing something like that ever since, and I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing.
What I wanted to ask you, based on your story, because I've seen your backstory, and you know, there's a couple things that you touched on briefly that I kind of want to hit on in a little more detail, just because they were really important. You talked about nearly dying. You talked about just one message changing your life. And you talked about not being able to read, but then later being able to read. And I kind of want to know what those parts were, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah. I nearly died. I was surfing Lani Akea, which is a North Shore wave. Right. It was big, about 40-foot faces.
Wow.
And my right side of my body froze and my diaphragm locked up on me. And I had accumulated strychnine and cyanide poisoning from some food I was eating there on the North Shore and some plants I was eating that I didn't realize were that toxic.
Wow.
So luckily I made it out of that, and I was unconscious for 3.5 days from that. So a lady found me in my tent, unconscious, and is the one that helped me go to a health food store, which led me to meet Paul Bragg. So it was strychnine cyanide. And if you've seen a rat laying on its back trying to gasp for air, that's almost what happened to me. So
wow.
That's how I almost died. The learning, when I met Paul Bragg, I'd never read a book from cover to cover. And I really did have difficulties learning reading. And after studying with him for the next 3 weeks, I started meditating, and I decided to go back and see my parents. I flew back to LA, I hitchhiked back to Texas, hadn't seen my parents in a long time. And they encouraged me to take a GED. Paul Bragg gave me this little affirmation: I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom. And he made me say that every day to help me overcome my learning problems. And I took this GED, where you sit down and take this test, and for some miraculous reason, I passed it. I couldn't read the questions. I just closed my eyes and penciled in a dot and figured I got nothing to lose. If I pass this thing, I get my high school degree. If I don't, I don't. nothing to lose. But I passed it. It was like really miraculous. Then I took a college entrance and I friggin' passed that somehow. Just guessing. It was purely guessing.
Hmm.
And I don't know how I did it. And then I took my first class in history. And I thought the same thing was going to happen. I was going to pass by this miraculous thing. But I ended up getting a 27. You needed a 72 to pass. I got 27.
Yeah.
I was devastated. I was so embarrassed because everybody's grade was above 70s and mine was down at 27. I was so humiliated. I went to my car and I cried in my car.
Yeah.
Drove home, curled up in a fetal position under a Bible stand at my parents' house, and really had a doubtful moment there. You know, is this whole thing an illusion? And all I could hear is my first grade teacher talking in my head. You know, he'll never read, he'll never be able to write, he'll never be able to communicate, no matter the mounting thing in life, won't go very far in life. Because that's what they told me when I was in first grade.
Wow.
And I had to wear a Dutch cap in first grade. So that was the 1960s. So I really had a low moment. My mom came home from shopping and she saw me there and she said, what happened? She hadn't seen me crying since I was about 13. And I told her what happened. And she said something that only a mother could say that really transformed my life. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, son, whether you become a great teacher, healer, and philosopher and travel the world like you dream, whether you return to Hawaii and ride big waves, or you return to the streets and panhandle as a bum like you've also done, which I did. I just want to let you know your father and I are going to love you no matter what. The mother's love, my mom's love at that moment, her gratitude, her certainty, her presence was exactly what I needed. When she said that, my hand went into a fist. I looked up and I saw a vision, the same vision I saw when I met Paul Bragg that night, of me speaking in front of 1 million people. That vision is painted in my office today. And it's an amazing picture that's painted. And I said to myself, I'm going to master this thing called reading. I'm going to master this thing called studying and learning. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to master this called philosophy and healing. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my service of love across this planet. I'm not going to let any human being on the face of the earth stop me, not even myself. And I was there was no turning back at that point. I got up and I hugged my mom. I went into my room. I got a dictionary out and I made a commitment to memorize that dictionary. And so I did 30 words a day. My mom tested me on 30 words a day, pronunciation, spelling, usage, meaning. And I gradually memorized 30 words a day until I was able to pass school. And then I just did not stop. I started reading everything I could, encyclopedias. Months later, my mom asked me, because I was born on Thanksgiving Day, what do you want for your birthday and for Christmas? I said, Mom, I want the greatest teachings on the face of the earth, the greatest writings humanity's ever created by the greatest mind who ever lived. And she said, well, you sure you don't want a t-shirt? I said, no. I want the greatest teachings on the earth. She contacted her brother, who was an Uncle Ralph, who's a professor at MIT in physics and chemistry. And he, as a gift, which I'm very grateful for, sent 2 giant 6 by 6 by 6 foot wooden crates on a flatbed truck down to our home. And they came in and they loaded them on the ground, these big crates. I opened them up with a crowbar. And I came in with thousands of books. I filled my room with thousands of books. And then I spent the next 18 to 20 hours a day. Unless I was driving to school and then I'd read on the drive, I was reading every single day, every day. And I just did not stop. Now I've been blessed to read over 30,000, almost 500 books. So I'm very grateful that I learned how to read. It's the thing that inspires me. And I get to share whatever I learned from all these great minds today around the world.
I'm curious on your reading issue. Was it some kind of dyslexia? Was it just you weren't interested? Do you do better listening than reading visually? What was it that made you change?
It was definitely a dyslexia. When I was 1.5, I had to go to a speech pathologist. I remember going there with my mom, and I had to put strings and buttons in my mouth because I wasn't able to use my mouth properly, and I couldn't pronounce things. Mm-hmm. And then I had dyslexia, and I was born with my arm and leg turned in, so I had a deformity of the arm and leg. I had to wear braces till I was 4. And so I just had dyslexia, and no matter what I did, I'd twist letters. I couldn't pronounce them. There's no meaning to them. the only way I made it through school and elementary school was asking the smart kids what they got out of the class.
Yeah.
If they said something and I listened to it, I could retain some of the information.
Right.
And I became known today for a guy who asked questions, because I've been asking questions all my life in order to get through those challenges. But I've eventually developed a methodology that it really helps people with dyslexia on not subordinating to outer authority by owning the traits of the greats, as I call it. Because a lot of times we humble ourselves and look up to people and think they have something we don't, instead of looking within and finding out where we have what we see in them inside us in our own form. And as I started owning the traits of the greats and taking great minds and great leaders and finding out what I admired about them, and then looked inside myself where I demonstrate that, I noticed that my dyslexia just dissolved away. In the last 30 years, it's just dissolved away. So I now help other kids who have dyslexia with that simple tool. It's such a powerful tool.
You know, that's such an interesting thing, because you talk about some of the things that I studied with curiosity and some of the things that hold people back. And that was my research, what was keeping people from being curious, because you changed from not really being that curious to being overly curious compared to most people. Wouldn't you say? I mean, that was a huge,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you bring out some of the, I found 4 things keep people from being curious, and it's fear, assumptions, technology, and environment. And your environment, obviously your mother had a huge impact. And there's a lot of things you're telling me that are fear-based, assumption-based. You've been told you couldn't, your teacher, whatever she said to you, all those things that come back in our heads. And I loved your research, because we do look at other people and we see, oh, they're so great. I wish, you don't see that you have those things, or they're so bad. You don't see you have those things. And that's a very fascinating realization. And you came to a lot of your realizations from reading so much on these ologies. So I want to talk about these ologies and what is an ology for people who aren't really aware, and what made you go that direction?
When I met Paul Bragg that night, he mentioned the term universal laws. That somehow just sounded cool.
It does sound cool.
And he also talked about mastering your life, and that sounded cool. Mastery,
Right.
universal laws. That sounded like really cool stuff. When I moved back to Texas, and I started getting to that dictionary, I looked up what is a universal law. And I realized it's a general principle, usually in mathematics, that is a general law that's brought into a proof in equations and mathematics. But when I went and looked at it, it took me back to Aristotle. And it took me back to what he called natural laws. And then it took me back to what was called at the time the logos.
Right.
And Leibniz called it that, and the Christians called it that. And the logos was the reason and the order that was inherent in nature, that the philosophers of natural science were trying to find the laws that govern nature, going back to Thales.
Right.
And so I looked up the logos, and it was kind of like, it meant reason and the verb and the word. And it was like, from a theological perspective, it was like the word of God. And
The answer, right?
talking onto the universe and making the divine design kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that's kind of cool.
Uh-huh.
And then, but then when I looked at the logos, I found out that logos was also used in ology, the study of in information. So the highest of worship was the study of nature, study of laws. So I went in the encyclopedia and dictionary, and I looked up every ology, every discipline, every field of study and inquiry that an individual could make. And I made a list of them alphabetically. And then I realized that by the time I was doing that, I asked some of the professors, what is to get, I read René Descartes' book that my uncle sent me on European philosophers from Descartes to Nietzsche. And Descartes said that he wanted to be a man of letters. And a man of letters was somebody who had multiple disciplines mastered, was a polymath. And I want to be a polymath, and I want to be a man of letters, and I want to understand these laws of the universe. So I made a list of all of them, and then I found out that the average PhD will devour at least 100 books in their field, at least 100 books. After their basics,
Right.
they'll read at least 100 texts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay, so I made that a goal to read 100 books in each of the ologies that I found. And the number of ologies have gone, obviously, since the last 48 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so some areas I've gone on to 400 and 1,200 books in an area. 1,400 books in some areas. In some areas, maybe 60 books. And after a while, you go, oh, I got it all. I've seen what's in that field. And I just went out to tackle as many disciplines to try to find the most universal principle to base a foundation of human behavior on. So I can study mineralogy and lithophile remodifications of minerals in the study of rocks, and they're related to enzymes and the study of enzymology, to be able to study biology, to be able to relate to how we have energy to think in the brain. So it doesn't matter where I'm coming from. It all goes back to the evolution of consciousness.
Uh-huh. It's really interesting. I think, don't you have a degree as a chiropractor too, right? You have this background.
I want to be involved in healing arts.
Uh-huh.
And I was pre-med in college by the time I was in my third year. And I was in honor roll by then. I mean, I just went right to the top.
Right.
And then what happened is they asked me what I wanted to study, and I didn't believe that we had an excess of organs and a deficiency of drugs. I believed that we had a natural ability to heal, and I was interested in how to maximize the natural potential within the human being, so much more than blaming something on the outside and looking for outside solutions. I wanted to look at what the inner potential was.
Right.
And chiropractic, there was naturopathic and chiropractic at the time, and naturopathic had too many constricts, and so I took a chiropractic. I'm so glad I did, because the people I met and the pathway of studies that I got. I also went on to Baylor Medical School while I was in chiropractic college, and I also did dentistry while I was in chiropractic college to find out if the education I was getting is up to par. And then I made the standard 10 times whatever the education was for my own standard. And I found that if I lectured on the topics, it accelerated my learning. So I forced myself to do dental talks and medical talks and chiropractic talks and all these other things while I was in school. And I taught almost every single day. So that expedited the learning process. And I just anything on the maximization of human potential and awareness and the evolution of human consciousness on any possible field. I'm writing a textbook right now. It's an 800-page textbook on the relationship between human beings and the sun. And it's on nuclear physics, and it's on the nuclear transmutation and transformation, fission and fusion relations in human psychology as it relates to the development of stars in the Milky Way and in the galaxies. And people go, what?
Yeah.
I'm absolutely certain it'll be a mind-blowing, fascinating exploring it.
A light read, though, right?
It's in depth. There's a lot of disciplines in there, but at the same time, if people knew the role we play in biology with our consciousness, it's a panpsychic view of holographic constructs coming from string theory all the way down into the sun and down to black holes, down into Earth. It's just mind-blowing. It relates to our evolution and what we do on this planet, our mission in life, way more than people comprehend. And I just can't wait to present it. I'm presenting it in November.
I can't wait to read that too. One of the books I've always loved was Death by Black Hole. And I'm a very much like how you are. Like, I want to learn everything about everything, kind of sponge. I learned this and I learned that, but not to your level. Do you ever feel like you get like an obsession? Like I thought I heard you say you'll do this for like 16 hours or something. I don't know what I heard in an interview, but it seemed really long amount of time that you were reading at one stretch when you were young.
No, I've done 20 hours. I've done days because I'm on a roll and I don't pay attention to time during that time. I'm on a roll. I've been doing it 47 and a half years. So
And you're married or not married?
Well, I was married to somebody from Australia who passed away 16 years ago. I'm dating now an actress and a singer and model from Istanbul.
So, what did they think of you being this focused? Or
well, they're very anybody that's with me, if they're not focused, it's not going to work. they got to be focused too.
I imagine you'd have
if they got idle time, then I'm not the guy.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Come on, we're going right now. Let's study. Let's go.
It's got to be global visionary. Then I'm with. My wife was Athena. We live on a ship called the World, and I'd sail around the world. Now, right now, I'm not able to get on because of the corona, but soon we'll be back on. So I've been living on there 20 years. So we sailed around the world, and we now go and speak and travel and stuff like that.
Is that a yacht, or what kind of boat is it?
It's a private yacht. It's the biggest yacht in the world, actually. But it's a private yacht. There's 100 of us that own it, and we sail around the world. So but that's the perfect place, because I've said that the universe is my playground, the world is my home, every country is a room in the house, every city is a platform to share my heart and soul. And so when I saw the world, I said, that's perfect. That goes all over the world. It goes from the Antarctic to the Arctic. It's nonstop sailing. I can get off and on as I need to, as I travel, and it's the perfect home. So that's home. I'm here in a hotel right now, but because that's not available, but that's home. And my wife passed away 16 years ago. She was a cosmic lady. She was a singer, was an actress, wrote books, was a mystic. She was an amazing lady, but she passed away with cancer unexpectedly. And so I've dated a couple girls, three girls since then. Now I'm dating another one. All of them have been magnificent and amazing people, but I'm the kind of open guy that, says anything that I'm not willing to do for you, I got to be willing to delegate. Anything I'm not willing to do for my mate, I got to be willing to delegate. So I tell him, if I'm not able to make love, I say, well, if I called Hugh Jackman and I had him make love on my behalf, would you still love me?
You're the perfect guy if you bring in Hugh Jackman.
They say, I'd still love you. I'd still love you.
That's so funny.
I'm a very, probably an oddball to some people, but I love what I'm doing. I'm on a mission to do it. I do have a global life, and the girlfriend that I have is also
and a daughter, right?
I have two daughters and a son.
Okay.
And two daughters
Your daughter
are
was taking over your business though someday. I heard you had this legacy for her, right?
Elena's got the business. Brisha's also in on it, but she's also a singer and she's also a fashion designer, and she's an amazing girl. Mm-hmm. My son's a YouTube guy. He's got 27,000 followers or whatever. He's growing, and
it makes me wonder though. When you have kids and you have a parent like you, and sometimes my daughter will say this to me. She's like, "Mom, I'm not like you. I can't do all these things." You know what I mean? It's just, that's not her desire in life. And I'm like, I don't want you to be like me. You got to be like you, right?
You got to be you. That's right.
Yeah, you got to be you. But is it intimidating to be your kid?
I'm sure that there's part of that. But they all are unique. And I've told them, I said, look, you don't compare yourself to anybody else. You compare your own daily actions to your own dreams.
Right.
And I made my son, I had a archive all the way going back into my 20s of audios and video programs I did and things of this nature. And I hired my son. I said, I'd like to do things. So you don't compare yourself to where you are now to where I am now, but you compare yourself to where I was at your age. So I said, I want you to look at the journey and have some laughs and actually fall over laughing and looking at the journey from when I was your age all the way till today. And it was really a great exercise because I got to archive him, which I win, and he got to see that and get paid to do that. So he just watched videos and audios and listened. And that was a way of, giving him an education, and also learned that, oh, my dad was an idiot, And it allowed him to go after what he wanted to do, which I thought was great. But the other daughters, as they've gone on, I've always told them, I said, look, it's your dream. You got to follow your heart. You can't subordinate to anybody else.
Right.
We're not here to live in shadows. We're here to stand on shoulders. And they found their niches, and they found both their boyfriends and potential partners in my programs. So they come to the programs and they help me in the programs, and they.
Well, then they're fixed already. Then.
They said, Dad, we can't date anybody that doesn't know your work. It's a prerequisite to date them.
Right. Yeah.
You want to kiss me? Come to the seminar.
That's so. Everything you write about just fascinates me because I've been writing my next book about perception, and I guess because I wrote a book on curiosity and I've written about emotional intelligence and all these things, I kind of see all this as perception, of how we view ourselves, how we view others. It goes into the empathy of emotional intelligence. It goes into the IQs and the critical thinking. It's kind of like IQ, EQ, cultural quotient, and curiosity quotient all combined when you're talking about perception. How do you see it? And just give me your viewpoint of how perception impacts our lives, especially in the working world.
Well, boy, we got a couple months.
Go ahead. Knock yourself out.
Yeah. So my observation is every perception we have is filtered through the pulvinar nuclei,
right?
The gating mechanism, with a selective bias according to what we value most. So if your highest value is your children and you're 35 years old, you have 3 children, and you're focused on being a mother at the time, when you walk in a mall, you're going to spot children's clothes, children's education, children's things. You're not going to watch and see motors and computers and things that you don't see how it's going to help you get what you want. So you filter your reality out. So the hierarchy of your values filters your reality of perceptions, filters your decisions. You're going to make a decision based on whatever you believe is going to give you the greatest advantage or disadvantage with the data that you're picking up that you filtered. And then you're going to take actions accordingly. And your highest probable action is the one that you think is going to give you the greatest advantage in what's going to help you fulfill what's most meaningful. So you're filtering it. When you're living by your highest values, you're most objective with that information. And when you're living by lower values, because you're trying to fit in and conform, and you're afraid of, startling other people or whatever, and you lose yourself into the crowd, you go into more subcortical areas of the brain, and you end up getting into your amygdala and go into the desire center, and you tend to avoid pain and seek pleasure, and you tend to subjectively bias as a survival mechanism your reality, and therefore filter reality in a skewed manner. And then you exaggerate the ups and downs, and you have a kind of a subjective bias. And then we end up having false positives and false negatives in our perceptions. And so we skew it, and then we store that in our subconscious, quote, mind, which is electronically and molecularly in the brain. And we end up having all this data that's basically not the most fluent and congruent information to help us maximize our potential. So yeah, our perceptions are influenced by the cultural subordinations that we have. Because as Freud says, the second you get to 1 year old and your mommy becomes your authority and you're frightened of losing your mommy, you'll inject her values because you don't want to be without mommy. So you'll confuse your identity with who you are relative to mommy. Then it goes to daddy and preachers and teachers and then society, and you eventually try to fit in and lose your identity and create these, kind of alter egos and false egos of who you are. And eventually you have to learn to get past that, transcend that, what Kohlberg says. So you're going through and you're getting that. The emotional is the conflict between all these injected values and your own identity trying to emerge. And you create all these emotions because of the subjective biases that we perceive because we're not consistent on the priorities in our life. You got to give ourselves permission to live and fill our day with high priorities. And, I learned that at age 27, how important it is to decide what is really, truly the most important, highest priority action I can do today, this moment, to help me fulfill what's most meaningful that serves the greatest number of people. If I do that on a daily basis, I'm more objective, I'm less subjectively biased, I'm less likely to inject the values of others, more likely to lead, more likely to emerge as a leader, more inspired, more authentic, more spontaneous. I'm more expanded in my awareness. I reach more full potential by doing that. So I got to give myself permission to do what is inspiring to me that serves the greatest number of people. If I do that every day, amazing opportunities come into my life.
And I think that's really an important point. As I was listening to some of your other interviews, I was thinking about how you said you like to delegate the things that you don't want to do. And you pick these certain things. If your wealth is what your desire is, then you have to do these things. And it's interesting because I was a little conflicted as I was listening to you, because I'm like, I like to do the stuff no one else likes to do, but those are the kinds of things that don't make money. But the things
you may not have that as a highest value or high value. The majority of people, I can stand in front of 10,000 people and ask them if they want to, how many of you want to be financially independent? All the hands will go up.
Right.
And then I'll ask them how many of you are, and all the hands will go down.
Yeah.
I said most people, when they fantasize about financial independence, they fantasize about living the lifestyles of the rich and famous and spending money on consumables that depreciate in value, buying liabilities. They don't have a value in buying assets. But I learned that if I do that, I'll be working my whole life for money and I'll be its slave instead of its master. So I decided to buy assets and invest in assets. Now I don't have to work. I've got money coming in.
Right.
I made almost $1 million in a week, now, off passive income. So I don't have to work. I do the work because I love it. The purpose of financial independence is not because you want a fancy lifestyle. I keep a simple lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted it because I wanted to do what I loved, because I loved doing it, not because I needed to do it, not because I had to do it, not because I had to pay bills.
Yeah.
I wanted my finances to done it. And then as a result of it, to exemplify what's possible, I wanted to self-actualize all 7 areas. I wanted to wake up my genius. I wanted to have an international global business. I wanted to have financial independence. I wanted to have a global family dynamic, which I got. I want to have social influence, meet amazing people around the world. I want to have vitality. I'm almost 66. I'm still cranking. And I want to be inspired and create a spiritual movement. I just got asked to speak to 100,000 people on spirituality in India this week. So I wanted to have all of those things manifested. And so I didn't want to be, subordinate in any of them. So I'm a firm believer you can empower all of them. You can empower all of them. If you don't empower yourself intellectually, you'll be told what to think. If you don't empower yourself in business, you'll be told what to do. If you don't empower yourself in finance, you'll be told what you're worth. You don't empower yourself in a relationship, you'll be, honey, do this on stuff you don't want to do at home. If you don't empower yourself socially, you'll be kind of told propaganda that's misinformation. Don't empower yourself physically, you'll be told what drugs to take and what organs to remove. Don't empower yourself spiritually, you may be trapped in an ancient dogma that's not even real today, not a cosmological, up-to-date idea. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested in empowering all of them and doing what I can to help exemplify that possibility and inspire other people to empower as many as they want. There's no rule, there's no morality on it that if you don't do it, you're bad, or none of that. It's just, what do you want to do? And I've never met anybody that didn't want to empower all of them when they really were honest. Right. If they knew they could. If right. They knew that if somebody says, well, I'm not interested in money. Oh, if I showed you how to make money doing what you love doing, not because you need it, but because it's just able to be done, would you take it? Oh, yeah. They would take it.
Well, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about a certain amount of balance that people either, I grew up in a wealthy family where people were either like, they either didn't spend any money and, were super cheap and did certain things, or they were more the nouveau riche where they would just buy everything and they never really had anything of, value. And I think about, I guess I listened to your one talk where you were talking about Jimmy Choo shoes with the one interviewer, and I'm thinking, yeah, I like Jimmy Choo shoes. So I'm listening to this and I'm like, is there a balance that you don't become so obsessed with buying assets that don't lose value, that you can have a little appreciation for the Jimmy Choo part of life? Or do you have to limit that now for later and buy the Jimmy Choos once
my wife, we lived across the street from Gianni Versace. We were very friends with them.
Yeah.
And my wife, when she walked down Madison Avenue, every shoe store down that street knew my wife. Mm-hmm. And we had a shoe. Our first apartment, we had to finally move into another apartment because it became a shoe store.
A little bit of Melda, huh?
Yeah. When she died, she had $2 million worth of shoes. That's how many shoes she had.
She beats me.
We donated 800 pairs to a charity. But what's interesting is the reality is, as you master wealth building, what I did is I set up a rule that when I want to raise my lifestyle, I just raise my savings and investments the same amount and taxes amount. And I can raise my lifestyle any level I want as long as I'm willing to follow that little rule. So now you can, I don't need a lot. I've had that. I've had the Rolls Royces. I've had all this stuff and the penthouses. Mm-hmm. Been there, done that. That's not what it's about.
Right.
It's about doing something that's deeply meaningful. Money without meaning leads to debauchery. Money with meaning leads to philanthropy. And so I'm all for having that, mm-hmm. but that's not what it's about to me, because I've been there. I've seen that. And what it does is you just accumulate stuff and then you have that stuff run you. But doing something that is very inspiring, that makes a difference in people's lives, and being able to be fortunate enough to be able to do that because you don't have to, you do it because you really love to. Mm-hmm. To me, that's more self-actualized. So I built my wealth because I want to master that area. Mm-hmm. Not because of the lifestyle. I live on the ship. People think, oh, well, you live on this big yacht. Everything else. Actually, I'm very simple. Most of the time, I'm doing this. What I'm doing right now with you, yeah. And I'm in hotels. But I have that because it's the most efficient location in the world for me to live, mm-hmm. to fulfill my mission. I'm a mission guy, so yeah. I'm more about what's the most efficient location, because having a house that you're never there, that doesn't mean anything, but being a house that's moving around and you can then travel with it, that makes more sense. And my wife loved to travel, so this is a way I could travel or meet with her around the world. When 9/11 occurred, we were living in Trump Tower. We had this 62nd floor there. And so in the process of doing, we realized that she didn't want to be in New York after 9/11. So we had homes in Australia, so she went to Australia. And then I said, well, I'm not going to see you. So we got to come up with plan B. And that's when I got the ship.
It's so interesting to see what people's lifestyles are like. I've had a lot of billionaires on the show, from, Keith Kroc to Naveen Jain to, I mean, the list, so many, Craig Newmark. And as you talk to people who's really developed this, a lot of Naveen, for example, reads everything, sounds a lot like what focuses on whatever it is and just learns. And I mean, just from Steve Forbes and different people I've had on my show who've really been successful people, I talk to them about, their learning and what they've done to get better at, just to improve their lives. And I guess that's why I'm kind of interested in your learning and the work. I mean, if you've read those 2 crates worth of books, first of all, that's just like blows a lot of people's mind, and the stuff you're reading just from being a pharmaceutical rep and having a PhD and the things that I have, I know it's very intense stuff that you're talking about. I could follow you, but I think a lot of people might not be able to follow you. And I'm thinking they're going, that's just too much. I'll never be there. You know what I mean? How do you talk to the people who don't have your sense of, this level of being able to understand what we're talking about here? How do you get them? Do you think baby steps? What about bobbing this,
No, I do that. If I'm speaking on a mass television or something, I keep it simple. If I'm speaking to professors at university, I keep it more advanced.
Yeah.
It all depends.
Uh-huh.
If I'm speaking on astrophysics and meeting with Freeman Dyson at the Institute of Advanced Studies before he passed away, and I'm having a talk on astrophysics, I'm talking astrophysics. If I'm going to be talking to a mother's postpartum blues depression talk on television, I'm going to be talking about how you might be able to prioritize your daily actions to get the most out of doing things and get help. And be willing to have help and believe that you're worthy of having help and stuff. I'll keep it simple. So I try to meet people at their whatever their level of the world is. But I don't want to, in my own life, not continue to expand my awareness, because there's so much inspiration from learning about the subtleties and the magnificence. I think we live in a magnificent universe. The more I study all the feedback systems between the galaxies, the planet, Earth, geosystems, atmosphere, biology, everything else, the more I realize there is a panpsychic intelligence running the game. This is too intelligent to just ignore. This is almost esoteric going on here.
But if you could find out everything, all the answers tomorrow, then would you even want to, though?
Yeah. As Giordano Bruno in the Flammarion diagram, when he poked his head through the curtain and looked out into infinity from the finite world, he realized there's a vastness of infinity, and no matter what you know, you always know what you don't. There's bigger what you don't know.
Yeah.
So there's no end to that. You don't get to know it all. I don't have an expectation to know it all. I just love the learning, the journey. I love the journey of learning.
Right, I do too. And if they put you on top of a mountain, it's not the same as climbing the mountain. It's the experience. But I think it's interesting how many people, well, this is how the world is, because they know, you know what I mean? And no one, you really don't know. You know what you think you know right now. And I think that we get a lot of problems with that with religions and things. You know what I mean? People are dead set.
Religions stagnate if they're not keeping current. I just did a presentation on comparative religions because I studied 3,000 different religions.
Yeah.
And met with lots of religious leaders and done interviews with them and dialogues and stuff with people. And what's interesting is there are 3 major religions, actually 4 major religions on the planet that is based originally on a geocentric world. And it was based on the primal mobile that Aristotle had, and even Copernicus kept all the way into this early centuries of this last millennium. And their whole model is based on that. But yet the Hindus had more of a galactic religion, and today we're out looking at galactic clusters, and we're looking at super galaxy clusters and Laniakea, and we're looking at an observable universe. Our cosmology, as it expands, our religious understanding or our spiritual understanding has got to go with it. Yeah. Otherwise, we're living in a box. And so I confront those traditions. I honor where they are, but at the same time, I also say, okay, now let's keep going. Let's not stagnate. Let's keep going. We have to have holy curiosity, as Einstein said. True religiosity was the holy curiosity, a perpetual exploration of the magnificence of the universe.
But they still can't reconcile a general theory of everything to combine Einstein. And so do you think, why aren't you working on that? Your brain, you should do that.
I am. Believe me, I am on that.
Are you close to solving that?
No, it's not. Because as Leonard Susskind was interviewed the other day, he was answering this question. He says, I'll die and the next generation will come along and they'll add upon mine.
Right.
And just like Newton was overdone by Einstein, and then
Right.
quantum theory came in and did general relativity, just kept going. And we'll find out that it's even more, because they're about to do a particle accelerator that's 8 times more powerful than what we had.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to find new particles.
Right.
We're going to find new laws. And we can propose those, but we'll prove them as we go. There'll be theoretical physics at the cutting edge, and then there'll be practical physics to prove it. And so there's no end to that. I don't have a fantasy that it's going to be done, or this is the final thing. It's the exploration.
I think it's really
I love
important
learning
to have that outlook. And I remember in Neil deGrasse's book, he was talking, Neil deGrasse Tyson's book, where he said, at one point they interviewed top, physicists and they said something like, at this point, we've learned everything we can learn about physics, and all, back in the 60s or 40s or whenever they were quoting this guy. And they were really top minds for their time. And I don't think we'll ever know everything about anything. You know what I mean?
When they found out about when a photon can generate nanoparticles, they can actually develop mass out of something massless, and according to Einstein's equation. But what they didn't know at one time, that there were virtual particles as intermediate stages that store information that's sitting in the photon that goes into these particles, and those are conserved.
Yeah,
and that wasn't known, and even in Paul Dirac's time when he thought of particle nanoparticles. So that's a new piece. So to say that it's done is no, I don't buy that. I'd rather have the courage to go out there and speculate on some new things and throw some new ideas out there.
I love to talk about all the astrophysics and all that, but I kind of want to come back a little bit, because I think a lot of people who are listening are interested in the business aspect, and I want to get back because I took your assessment. I want to tell you what I came in at, by the way. Tell them a little bit about the assessment while I get my results here, because you do this, look at your values kind of assessment. What do you call it?
The value determination criteria. When I ask people what do they value in life, because nobody goes to work for the sake of a company. Right. They go to work to fulfill what they value. And if they can see how the job description and the mission of the company and the objectives of the company can help them fulfill what is highest on their values, they're engaged. Mm-hmm. They're more engaged. If they can't see how their daily duties are helping them do that, they just do the job. And to me, disengaged people cost them their lives, cost companies productivity.
Right.
So anything that can increase engagement, I'm interested in. I lecture a lot on that. And what I did is, when you ask people their values, they tell you social idealisms. They tell you what they think it should be, what they imagine it to be, just like, I want to be financially independent. No, you don't. You want to spend money immediately. So I want to know what your life demonstrates, not what you say. So I look at, how do you fill your space?
Right.
Because if you look around your space, things are really important you keep around you, within reach. Mm-hmm. I want to look at how you spend your time. You find time, make time, spend time on things that are valuable to you. I want to look at what energizes you, because when you're doing something that's really high in your value, your energy goes up. When you're not doing that, it goes down. I want to look at how you spend your money. You make money, find money, spend money on things that are valuable, and you don't want to spend money on things that don't. I look at how you spend your money. It tells me a lot about what's valuable to you. When I was in my 20s, I was buying 40 to 70 books a week. So that was obviously money was spent there. Now, I look at where you're most organized, because you spontaneously bring order to things that are valuable to you. If it's not, you let it go into chaos, entropy. I look at what you're disciplined on. What do you spontaneously do every single day that nobody has to remind you to do? I spontaneously research and do interviews. I've done 11 interviews. I've done 7 talks in a day, kind of stuff. Yeah. So I look at what I spontaneously do. Then I look at what exactly is it that I think about, visualize, and internally dialogue to myself about how I would love my life to be, that is actually showing evidence and metrics coming true. Not the fantasies about it's not ever happening, but the actual ones that are coming true. Because that tells me what you're committed to and you keep working towards, and you don't let anything out, externally interfere with that. Then I look at, what do you want to converse with other people about most? What do you keep bringing the conversation to? And if you get to talk about it, you'll be engaged all night with it, talking late into the evening with it. Mm-hmm. What inspires you and what's common to the people who inspire you? What are the most consistent goals that you actually have that you'd love to create that are coming true? Because the ones you commit to and actually make happen. And what do you spontaneously want to read, study, learn about, and listen to on YouTube? If I take those 13 questions and I make you answer 3 of those answers, and you answer those with integrity, not what you fantasize, wish it would be, or what it used to be, but what it actually is objectively today, you'll see reiterated answers that will surface, and it'll give you an idea, and it will point you in a direction to what's really your life is demonstrating is important, not what you fantasize about.
Mm-hmm.
Once we find out what that is and get the top 3 highest values and start structuring our life where you're able to do that, where you can't wait to get up in the morning and do that, and we structure and delegate the lower priority things and figure out how to get paid to do that, so your vocation, vacation are matching.
Right.
You're inspired to go to work. When you can't wait to get up and go to work and tap dance to work, people can't wait to get your service.
Yeah.
And if you do it in a way that meets needs by finding the niches that you want to solve the problems in and you want to contribute to, man, you have a fulfilling life then. Because you're doing what you love, getting paid for it, and delegating the rest off your plate. I don't do anything. I haven't driven a car in 32 years. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I don't do things that are not what is in my Inspire list. I don't waste my time on that. I delegate and surround myself with people that love doing that, so I'm around people that are inspired while I'm doing what I do that I love doing. I found that way more inspiring for me.
Well, as you talk about things that inspire you and things that you've read, you've read so many books, and I'm sure there's so many people who inspire you. When I was writing about curiosity, it's hard not to think of Albert Einstein or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or all the people who always say how much they value curiosity. Is there anyone who's your main, person that you think of as the go-to guy? Can you even get it to a list? No.
I will say, people ask me, I have probably, I don't know, 500,000 names in there.
Right.
Because I've studied so many different fields, and there's this one book has 2,200 people that have made a mark in this field. Just this new book, 2,200.
And
just this one
the
book.
name of the book, just so everybody can have it.
It's called it's called Experience the Sun.
Right.
Experience was a Dante Paradiso, highest heavenly state of consciousness, where you were enlightened and you were in fire and inspired by your life. Wow. So that's what it's about. It's not a popular book. It's not a self-help book.
Well,
this is for people that want to go and explore. Your most popular book, The Breakthrough Experience, would you say? That's probably that, and The Values Factor probably been the biggest sellers. But when people ask me, what book would you recommend? Mm-hmm. I tell people without question, Mortimer Adler's Syntopican Volumes 1 and 2 are the 2 best books that an individual could read on life. Period.
Wow. I got to read them. I haven't read them.
Syntopican Volumes 1 and 2 by Mortimer Adler. It's about 1,600 pages. It's 2-volume set. It goes from angel to man. Angel to love and man to world. And it's the greatest minds who's lived in the last 2,700 years and the summary of their ideas on the most important topics for a human being to know. All in one package.
Well, this is the time to read it during COVID. Everybody's looking for a good read. That'll keep you busy for a while. That's a great suggestion. And I think that there's so many people who are interested in knowing, what inspires you, because you've been so successful and you've been through these difficult times and challenges. You're just an ultimate success story. If you had braces and you had to wear on your arms and legs, you couldn't speak properly. You had all of these things and you overcame everything. So I imagine that you talk a lot about this in your speeches and everything you do. Now, there's something called the Demartini Method. Is that how you say it? I want to make sure I say your name properly. Okay. That it's absolutely what we've been talking about here, but how would you summarize what the Demartini Method is?
When I got the books from my uncle, mm-hmm. One of the books was Paul Dirac's writings on particle and antiparticles. And when I had a dictionary, because I had to have a dictionary and an encyclopedia to be able to read that, that was way over my head at the time. Something stuck in my head that you could take a particle of light and convert it into matter and make positive and negative charged particles of matter, a positron electron. When I saw that, I thought, wow, And you could take the positron electron and put them in a particle, a positron electron accelerator, and you can make light. And I thought, wow, you could convert energy into matter, matter to energy, thanks to Einstein. I thought, I wonder if you could take positive and negative emotions and slam them together and do like Carl Jung did and find a synchronicity, him and Wolfgang Pauli, and
Right.
find a coincident synchronicity of those. Could you make enlightenment? Just as a metaphor.
Right.
So I went on a journey of studying everything on the brain. I lectured on the brain and studied the brain inside out, probably 900 books on the brain. And then I went and devoured psychology the best I could. And I went and studied physics the best I could, trying to find a solution on how to take anything extrinsically stimulating and perturbing a human psyche and how to bring it back into poise and grace. So I call them the 6 transcendentals: true gratitude, true love, true inspiration, true enthusiasm, certainty, and presence, the 6 transcendentals. And how to take the polarized emotions that we get infatuated with or resent, that we seek and avoid, that we have impulse, instinct, our desire, amygdala centers, and how to take those. And because anything we infatuate or resent, that we're conscious the upsides and unconscious downsides, or conscious downsides and unconscious upsides, any of those occupy space and time in our mind and run us and make noise. So how do we take that noise and make a clear mind? So I created a series of questions that allowed us to bounce mathematical equations in the mind and to change the chemistry, change the epigenetics and the neuroplasticity in such a way that you could have grace. And it does not matter. There's nothing the mortal body can experience that the immortal soul, the state of unconditional love, can't love and transcend. So I've developed a method through a series of questions that allow you to see things, the apparent chaos in your life, in a way that it's got a hidden order. And so you all of a sudden have an implicate order there, as Bohm described, and you're graced by whatever happens. So nothing in this planet that you can experience can't be turned into opportunity. So it's a very powerful exercise. I've taken thousands of people through this process and trained 6,000 or 7,000 facilitators around the world doing it. So it's very, very inspiring work.
Wow. Well, everything you work on is inspiring. I was having a hard time knowing which things to go talk to you about, because I'm like, I could talk to him 4 hours about that, 6 hours about that.
Well,
So
we'll have to do another interview sometime on something else.
was there one thing I didn't ask you? You want to make sure you get in today, because I want to make sure, because there was just too much to narrow it down.
If there's one thing
that I didn't get to cover today that you really want people to leave them with.
Yeah, from a practical perspective, the magnificence of who you are, the really authentic you,
Mm-hmm.
not the facades, not the personas, not the existential distracted you,
Mm-hmm.
but the real, true, essential you. The magnificence of that is far greater than any fantasies you'll ever impose on yourself.
Yeah.
And you got to give yourself permission to shine, not shrink. Radiate, not gravitate. And that will occur by living by true priority, not external motivated priorities, but priorities that are called from the heart. When courage comes from heart, and the courage to be yourself in a world that's trying to make you other than yourself
Mm-hmm.
is the mastery path. As Ernest Becker said in his Denial of Death, people have a collective heroism and an individual heroism. The individual who is able to walk the path, be an unborrowed visionary, blaze a new trail with an innovative idea, handle the oppositions and challenges of the naysayers, and walks the path, they automatically become the new trailblazers that set the new pace for a new paradigm. And I believe that the truth is there's a genius in every one of us,
Mm-hmm.
and that genius is able to surface to the degree that they live congruently by what they value most. And to be authentic to that is probably the wisest an individual can do, whether it's in their business or their personal life or whatever. And I believe that helps you empower all areas of life. And I'm fully believe that you can live an inspired life. There's absolutely no reason an individual has to, other than the ones that they impose on themselves by the fantasies that they compare their life to. I would say depression is a comparison of your current reality to a fantasy you're addicted to. As long as you're holding on to an expectation others are supposed to live in your values, or you're supposed to live in other people's values instead of living authentically according to your own, you're automatically creating symptoms, physiological, psychological, sociological, theological symptoms to guide you back to authenticity. everything is on the way to get you to be authentic, I think, in this world. And I think we live in a magnificent world guiding us to do that. So I tell people, just make a commitment to live by priority. If you find that one thing that is most authentic to you and you stick to that and build momentum on that, eventually you become so on fire and enthused by it. People come around to watch it burn, and people come and serve that objective with you.
That's awesome. Well, this has been just so inspiring. I think that's the greatest place to end this, but I think a lot of people are going to want to follow you and find your work. Is there some website or social media you'd like to share?
You know, they can come to my drdemartini.com website. They can go on the value determination process. My website is just an educational experience, as you can imagine. There's YouTube videos and thousands of interviews. I'll have a weekly podcast that they can join me, Dr. Demartini's podcast. If they go on there, they can find out by looking at the events where I'm going to be speaking. I do programs every week. I mean, every day I'm doing programs, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So I'm, people think that guy's crazy. I delegate that. I find that's wiser to delegate. I delegate
great.
sleeping to other people.
Yeah.
For 35 years, I slept 4 hours a day. I do more now, but for many years, I delegated that. But I really believe that you deserve to do something amazing. Don't let any human being on this planet stop you from what you really dream about.
That's awesome. Well, thank you.
You've done it. You're living it. You're demonstrating it. You're doing what the things you love. You can see it.
Yes.
And you're making a huge difference.
Thank you.
That's the way to live.
Yeah.
You're exemplifying it. That's why it's inspiring. So thank you for this interview.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And we will be back right after this message.